It has been a very bad time for the Lakeshore General Hospital of late. Lots of reports. We had the health minister himself showing up now, I believe more than once as well. ER deaths higher there than anywhere else. Andre Fortin, who is the Liberal health critic, was on with Elias earlier in the week. This story came up in the National Assembly because Andre Fortin tried to press the health minister on how they could finally start to make things better there. I want you to hear some of what he had to say with respect to the Lakeshore General.
The situation at the Lakeshore doesn't seem to improve no matter what the government does. So we just want to know, what's the next steps here? Why is nothing improving, and what is he planning to do in order to reverse course? And what we really got from him was we're just following the plan. Everything seems to be going great. Nothing to see here. In the last year and a half, we've gotten reports of toxic workplace, systemic neglect of patients, avoidable deaths, management that was hiding the truth from families. We gotten reports that Minister Dubé was informed of the situation and he ignored the letters from staff who wanted to improve it. So really, there has to be a special focus put on the Lakeshore, and that's why what we would like to see is if there are 135 recommendations that are out there, then we know what the solutions are. But can we have a detailed progress report as to what's being done, what the impact of these measures are, and what remains to be done?
So that kind of wraps it up. That's pointing at the health minister saying, we know the conditions exist as they are. Most troubling part is the second half of that, where he talks about people who work there having written, pointing out the problems that are there, and those problems, those letters being ignored. Nathan Friedland is, in fact, someone who works at the Lakeshore General Hospital. He's an ER nurse there. Nathan, you sent us a rather lengthy email, I guess trying to make the case that either it's not as bad as we're making it out to be, or to be fair, the Lakeshore is not the same as every other hospital for whatever reasons, because it's serving a much broader population, a much older population. But you heard what the Liberal critic there said. Do you at least agree with him as far as some of those recommendations have not been acted on and could have been acted on?
I can't disagree with what he's saying. It takes time to put into place 135 recommendations. Now, the deadline for all of that, I believe, is April 30th. And from my perspective, they appear to be working on it quite diligently, although it takes time. But I can't deny anything that he said there in the House of Commons.
So to your point, I'm not saying you work there. It's different. You have a completely different perspective. What is the issue, the biggest issue as far as you're concerned?
Well, the West Island, particularly where Lakeshore is situated, has a very high population of elderly people. And there's at least a dozen nursing homes that surround Lakeshore. It's probably more like 24. And, the average age of our patients is like over 70. So what do these patients generally get that puts them into a hospital? They get heart attacks, they get strokes, or they fall. Now, Lakeshore is not a real tertiary care hospital. In other words, if a patient comes in who's in cardiac arrest and who's over 70, whatever, and we stabilize them, we regain a heartbeat, we intubate them. Well, the treatment in order to save their life is a heart catheterization. And there is no heart catheterization lab on the West Island. There certainly isn't one at Lakeshore. So what has to happen to that patient? That patient has to be transported downtown to the Glen or the Jewish, someplace that has a heart cath lab in order to save that patient's life. And time is cardiac tissue. Mm-hmm. The more time that takes, the higher the chance of death. And that's a big reason why there's a high death rate. We have no neurosurgeon at the Lakeshore. They can't do brain surgery. So if a patient falls, hits their head, and is on a blood thinner, and has a massive cerebral hemorrhage, and is in a coma, well, we'll intubate that patient, but the patient then has to be transported downtown to a real tertiary care hospital, like right. the neuro, in order for them to have a brain surgery. And in order to transport the patient, we have to take one of our code room nurses and liberate that nurse to go in the ambulance and keep the patient alive, hopefully, until they get to the tertiary care center. And that leaves us with one nurse down for as many as 5 code room patients, which are extremely sick and at risk of death. So that's another reason why the death rate's so high. So you combine the lack of resources on the West Island. I mean, it's a crime that there's no heart cath lab on the West Island. This is absurd with all the elderly that are out here. I mean, how has it been for all these years and there's no heart cath lab? I mean, finally in Vaudreuil, when they finally get that new hospital up, that's going to have a heart cath lab, and that will be a big boost for the West Island. But as it stands, Lakeshore, the only hospital out here, all we can do is stabilize, cross our fingers, transport, and hope the patient doesn't die. And that's totally unfair on the West Island, totally unfair to the nurses and doctors trying to save these people's lives, and nobody mentions it. And it's a big, big problem.
It's pretty grim, obviously, the way you lay it out, as true as it is, and I completely understand what you're saying. It seems to me the even bigger problem would be, yes, there's no facilities you mentioned out there right now as a resource you can use, but even if there was going to be, it can happen in a day or a week or a month. That's not even a viable solution, it would seem to me.
Exactly. So in the meantime, we do the best we can with what we have, but that ain't much. It really is not much.
Nathan, I thank you very much for reaching out. We're hopefully going to hear more of this. I know we're trying to get the health minister as well. As I said, I know he's been out to the Lakeshore at least a couple of times. You think that's a sign he understands what's going on, but not sure what it means beyond that. Nathan, thank you.
Good.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.